So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining our webinar. Today we're in such challenging times with the coronavirus, and we are here to talk to you about how teens and young adults are affected by this globally. They have emotional issues, isolation, and how we're going to talk about how our free mobile game called Shadow's Edge can help, as well as highlight some other resources. We know you might be familiar with Shadow's Edge, but just to bring everybody on the same page, we do want to start with a little bit of history, and then we'll go into question and answer rounds amongst us. So it will be a panel discussion, and if you would like to ask us some questions, please click the raise the hand, and then Idette, who's facilitating this, will point out to us that there are questions waiting. Obviously, we'll break in between as well to give you the chance to ask some questions. So we think that Shadow's Edge content can really address the emotional needs of young people facing all kinds of challenges, including this COVID virus. And Shadow's Edge helps players express themselves and build emotional resilience in a way that is comfortable and entertaining to them, and on a medium that they are comfortable with. And so with the game, they have a nice entryway to work through the feelings that they're going through in something that they're really familiar with. They play on their phone anyways, and so we empower teens with this tool to work through everything from daily disappointments to life traumas. Today we have Kristi Pikiewicz, our psychologist, and our project founder, Sheri Sobrato here. And I will let them introduce themselves by just explaining a little bit about the emotional impacts that the virus is having on their lives. So Kristi, what is your personal experience with this in the last couple of days? And can you talk a little bit about the emotional impact that the virus is having on today's youth?
Of course, of course. Hello, everyone. Well, my kids and many students all over the country and the world are out of school. And I think we are all experiencing a wide range of emotions, everything from fear to anger, isolation, confusion. I believe it's also important to recognize that the new roles that we are all taking on. So some parents are becoming teachers, some teachers are becoming distance learning experts, which is sort of funny. But as teenagers, we have to remember that emotional growth, a lot of it is defined by who they are. So Erickson calls the stage between 12 and 18 years old identity versus role confusion. So it's really important for people to remember, in order to develop identity, teens crave peer socialization, and they gently are wanting to push away from the identities that their families of origin have created for them. So that is an incredibly important and natural growth process for them, and an important milestone that they work through. So for example, during this time, my 12-year-old daughter, she loves rock climbing. She loves her peers, her other athletes that she climbs with. Obviously, she appreciates her coaches and her teammates. And right now, we see the tension within her every now and then in terms of outbursts and things, because this identity of herself as being a competitive rock climber is not really happening. She is left doing sit-ups and push-ups and pull-ups and stuff in our back room, which is great because she's getting physical exercise. But this piece of who are you as a person, and how am I different from my family of origin, she's not really able to express or to play with or to work through and grow. So these roles are really becoming more and more challenging for teenagers as we socially distance.
Sheri, what about you?
So the first thing that came up for me, for those of you who don't know me, I'm the founder of the project, and it was founded based on a personal experience I had, which was a brain tumor, which turned my life upside down. And when I start thinking about what are these kids and young people, and really all of us, because we're all in the same game, right? When our life is turned upside down, how do we cope when all the roles that we had played in our life are somehow, like Kristi was saying, turned upside down? And at least when I was sick, I went through this period where it's like, well, if I'm not that I was a star athlete, but I enjoyed being very sporty, and I couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't be the same friend that I was before, because I had needs this time instead of fulfilling everybody else's needs. And I was working on Wall Street. I just finished a stint on that. I wasn't, I was zapped out of that. My first job as being an independent young adult, and zapped back into my parents' house, which was 3,000 miles away from my old adult life. And to tell you the truth, it was harder, or at least easier for me to, instead of feeling like, gee, my life was sucked away, I mean, that the cancer was going to kill me, it was more the real feelings that I had, which is, this cancer has turned my life upside down and I'm not who I was before. And I don't even know if I even acknowledged it at the time. So I'm thinking that some of the kids may be in their feelings right at this moment, like, I'm frustrated, I'm sad, I'm angry. And some of them, it's gonna, they're adjusting to their new life, but they're maybe not acknowledging those feelings along the way. And I think that they can build up and mount up. And I think it's so important to give them an opportunity today. And it may not be with their families. Maybe it's too challenging for them to even know how they're feeling at the time. Or maybe their parents or even their teachers at school that in the online education. And I know, with my own kids, their middle schoolers are participating in advisory and they're talking to them about how is this impacting your life. And I think that's important, but I think they need to take hold of what they can and process it in their own way, in their own time, in their own space, not because necessarily we're asking questions. And that's where I really do think that Shadow's Edge can come into play, because we started the whole Digging Deep project to support kids' emotional health. And we started with chronic and serious illness. And we quickly learned that the content in our game really can apply to any kid. When I say kid, I mean teen or young adult experiencing any kind of life challenge. And this is a big one. And Kristi, what do you think about the importance of people experiencing their feelings at the time? Can you say a few things?
Absolutely. I really relate to a lot of what you're saying. One feature about Shadow's Edge that I love is that there are journal prompts. So players are able to express themselves through graffiti. And by labeling your own feelings while you're experiencing the stressful situation, you can prevent that event from becoming a traumatic memory. So our brains are hardwired to keep us safe. So when something scary happens, like a giant saber-toothed tiger, we try to remember everything around us, what time of day it is, the smell, all of those pieces, so that we don't get ourselves into that situation again. That's how our brain works. That then is stored in our brain as an isolated, stressful event, or as we would often say, a traumatic event. It doesn't have to be that way, though. If instead you're consistently checking in with yourself, reflecting on your emotions, staying regulated, so sort of in that 0 to 5 range instead of that emotionally dysregulated range, you can experience a stressful event, but the memory or the situation will be stored in a much more functional way in your brain, because it will be connected to multiple parts of your brain, and thus not becoming an isolated traumatic event. So it's huge to allow teenagers a safe place to express how they're feeling, and also gentle prompts to ask them to check in with themselves. Because for a lot of us, that, especially Americans, I hate to say it, but it's not innate always. So it's really a wonderful opportunity that Shadow's Edge provides.
And Kristi, if I can have a follow-up to that, what are some of the examples of what your patients are going through now that they approach you with?
I love that question because it's so
diverse.
So for me, yeah, well, exactly. It's so startling for me how inconsistent it is. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is I'm making myself much more available. So we definitely do things, at a scheduled time, but I'm also noticing a lot more check-ins, and the check-ins tend to be throughout the day, and it's very much a roller coaster ride. So sometimes people need to reach out. They need to socialize, whether you're an adult or, more importantly, for teens, again, because of those Erikson pieces around identity, to check in, to help get a little bit of emotional regulation. So reaching out to those lifelines to sort of have people help you stay in that 0 to 5 or that emotionally regulated zone. So I think my biggest impression is that people are doing this a lot more than I've typically seen.
Do you think that's also maybe because of, this feeling of being out of control, Sheri?
Well, I actually really do, because, first of all, I'm only speaking from my own experience, but I know what helped me when I felt like my life had been turned upside down was trying to feel what part of that. I mean, everything seemed out of control, and maybe I'm a control freak, but I wanted to try and figure out, is there something, when the situation seems overwhelming, is there something that I can do for myself that will make a difference? And certainly that checking in with yourself and is one thing that's hugely important. But I also wanted to make some changes. I wanted to figure out, okay, I can't control what's going on, but maybe one thing that I can control is how I respond to it. And, for me, that meant reading a lot of self-help books and making changes in my life. And we know today's kids aren't going to the self-help section of the bookstore. I mean, we don't even have bookstores anymore, to be honest. And so when we started, when I, was thinking like, how can we help people with the Dignity Project? I was thinking, well, maybe if we could deliver like what they would learn by reading self-help books or by going to psychologists, or in a simple way that would be entertaining and fun and free, and given that same experience of what you would learn through the process of emotional healing, however one gets to that place of feeling stronger, of making changes, of feeling more in control. So that's what the project is about.
And Kristi, maybe to add on to that, so this is not a problem. Yes, it's been amplified now with the coronavirus, but there has been a gap, right, in treatments. Can you explain a little bit more about that and how you've been managing those types of situations?
Absolutely. I think teenagers and kids in general often have a difficulty getting in and seeing a therapist. For young people, sometimes there's stigma, just like we have as adults. Also, they have to rely on family members for everything from making appointments to driving them there. For this reason and many others, I think resources like Shadow's Edge are so important. I also love what Sheri mentioned too about the idea of control. This is really a way for teenagers to take control of how they explore, how they reflect and process their emotions. It's really empowering when you feel like I can reflect and I can better understand myself, but on my own terms, instead of having an appointment that my mom or dad or family member makes and they drive me there and they're waiting in the lobby. All of those pieces feel very controlled for me instead of me controlling it. So teenagers, like we said before, searching this idea of identity, you can absolutely develop your sense of identity through socialization among your peers, but you can also do the really hard work of identity formation through self-reflection. And that's exactly what Shadow's Edge offers. It's a harder process potentially, but also maybe a more worthwhile one or a better endeavor.
And what are some other types of resources that you would recommend to people, even if it's not digitally, but something that they could do, and maybe then Sheri, you can jump in a little bit. You've done a lot of workshops with teens also using the book and using the game. So maybe Kristi, if you could start, and then Sheri, you could jump in with some examples there too, because I think it's interesting for people to know more than just Shadow's Edge, right? And know what's out there and also know what works and how that relates to Shadow's Edge when we then show the game in a few minutes.
Absolutely. So I like to think of self-care, and this isn't at all my idea, but if you Google self-care, you'll see that there are basically 5 different buckets that people look at or think about when they look at self-care. So there's things like physical self-care, so getting outside, keeping a schedule, making sure that you do things like that. There's absolutely pieces like socialization, so reaching out to family members, connecting, But there are other pieces too. So, and they're very similar to, they align really nicely to post-traumatic growth. So they also look at things like spirituality and other pieces of ways to sort of fill your bucket, per se, as you go through stressful times. So it's important for the teens and the children in our lives to be consistently filling their buckets and doing self-care. But it's also incredibly important for the adults, the family members, to be filling their own buckets, because if we run dry, if we are depleted, we can't be there for others. So you really need to be checking in with yourself, taking care of yourself very intentionally.
And I agree with that. I think that there's so many things that we can do for ourselves. But one thing that I've learned, Rosie, that you mentioned, in leading support groups for so many years, is I think there's a lot of techniques and I think a lot of things that are out there that say, okay, well, these are all the things that you can do, and here are all the ways that you can be positive, and here's how you can think, look on the bright side or whatever. But one of the most important things that I learned, over the years of leading support groups is, as important as all those things are, it's also important to acknowledge what's been lost. And the difficulty that we're going through, and not to just replace those important, it always bothers me when people call them negative feelings. I mean, they're not negative, they're just feelings. All feelings are just feelings, and giving people the opportunity of feeling whatever they're feeling. And one thing that's important before we look at the game is to understand what was, in developing Shadow's Edge, what was really our goal. And it was this process of mimicking the process of what we go through as we work through difficult situations in our life. And how do we do that in game? And as we'll see, healing is a process. It's not something that we just jump from A to C. I mean, there's this big kind of wave of up and down, like the up and downs like Kristi was talking about. And it's all good. And to be able to acknowledge that some days are going to be good days and some days aren't. Some days are going to be filled with frustration, and some days we're going to see, oh my gosh, there's something new or different about my life that I wouldn't have happened if we weren't going through this crisis together. So I think the best thing to do now, Rosie, is why don't you talk about how do we get to this place of having a game, and then show people what Shadow's Edge is all about if they haven't had a chance to look at it yet.
So my name's Rosemary, as I said at the beginning, but what I didn't say is I have a technological background. So I'm not a psychologist, but when I bought Sheri's book and talked to her about it, I was fascinated by that process of healing that she was talking about, and how you could bring that to an audience that is quite resistant to some of the traditional methods like reading nowadays. And coming from a tech background, there's a lot of, in technology, if you want to do something right, which you see with larger companies like Apple, it's all about storytelling and really being able to explain what the technology can do and how it can help you. And so that's what really drew me to this. And plus, I play lots of games. I have 6 nephews and nieces that at the time we started were all teens. So it was the target audience, if you will. 2 of them also have a chronic illness. And so I was really intrigued by that. So when Sheri asked me to then combine the power of technology and entertainment and then bring psychology into it, I immediately thought of a game, because it has the option, it has all the good things that the qualities that you want for storytelling. There's game mechanics involved where you can drive people to do certain things. You can work with rewards. If you do it right, it can be a judgment-free zone for people to experiment. And games have been proven to be effective in the brain for learning. And so if we can add all of that together and make it interesting enough, and also make sure that the content is timely, then I really thought this is something that we could do. I mean, after all, there's 2.4 billion people that play games on the planet. And so it's a medium that's really comfortable for youth. And play has existed a long time in psychology, right? We just brought it digital and on par with some of the quality games that young people nowadays play. But instead of just saying that, why don't I just share my screen, and then I can show you the game a little bit and explain a little bit more. So
Rosie, sorry, we have one question from Robin before
Yeah,
you get
sure.
deep in the game.
While I move the screen over, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I just have a quick question, and maybe you covered it. I logged in a little bit later, but I just want just to put out there, I run a nonprofit called Groundswell in Brooklyn. So we do mural public art, and a lot of our young people came to a center for a while, and worked in our studio. And as we're thinking, one of the things that I'm just thinking about top of mind is that as young people are asked to stay home and having to stay home, a lot of some young people, their trauma, their abuser, or their place of home is not the safe place, and it's the place where they're being asked to be confined to. So that's just wanted to share that's something that myself and my staff are thinking about as we're trying to roll out remote learning. And then I definitely want to, this is a great way to engage them as well. But just something that we're trying to put out more is that, like, yes, we understand that young people may be confined with the source of their trauma due to having to be at home.
Good point. Kristi, do you want to say something to this?
I think that's an excellent point. Thank you. It also really breaks my heart. It's hard to think about. I'm thinking two things. One is, even people who aren't necessarily perpetrators, during these stressful times, we may not be our best selves. So again, that goes back to the idea of the adults in the support people needing to be making sure that they're doing the self-care that's necessary, and making sure that as a community we can support the adults who are caring for the children. It also reminds me of people who've had other past traumas. So even if it isn't necessarily an abuse situation, if you have a history, or a family member has a history of chronic illness, or has a death in the family, an unexpected death, all of those pieces are sort of kept in your brain, as as like files. So you're now activating that very difficult file in your brain. And it can be really scary for people, especially if they didn't have an opportunity to process that information originally. So excellent point. And it really does touch me and break my heart to think that. But it's also very true for adults who are in domestic violence situations. So such a heartbreak.
And maybe from a gaming perspective, one of the things that that gaming lends itself well to is to have a suspension of disbelief. So there's a world that you enter, and at least for a little bit, I know this from my childhood also, if you have tough times, at least you can lose yourself in something. And if that is something that is helping you work through what you're going through, then that's obviously an added bonus versus, playing just a main title, if you will. Any other questions for now, or shall I start the demo?
Thank you. I appreciate the responses.
All right, so I'll talk a little bit about the game itself. I'll take you through all the levels and things like that. The demo will be roughly 10 minutes. And then we have also some opportunities for questions and answers. Idette will jump in if you're holding up your hand and there is a question, and then I'll stop and move it forward. So what happens when you enter the game, and that's the one little bit of part that I can't show you, is you have a beautiful, nice sound, and you have a beautiful city. But if I turn on the sound on, obviously, it's a little bit harder to hear now over a Zoom call, so I've turned that off. But we land in the city called Shadow's Edge, and Shadow's Edge has just been hit by a storm. I'm doing this on my phone, so that's why you're seeing the screen moving. And as you enter Shadow's Edge and start walking around, you meet this character, Ty. Ty will tell you that the storm hits, the background of the city, the background of the storyline, the background of the family. Ty will also let you know that Ty got stuck in the elevator, and when the storm hit, and that's why there's nobody else in the city except Ty. So you'll see that everything is sort of, this is the phase we call disruption, and everything here is just as if the storm had hit and then time froze. Everything's out of whack, it's flying around, it's dark. So all of this kind of content of what the game looks like, what the world looks like, the colors of the guardians, of the characters, as you can see, have all been talked through with psychologists, but also worked on with gamers. So we worked with both patients and teens on this game and young adults, and they've actually advised us. So for example, this character looks nothing like at the beginning, our first drawing, for example, because teens are not shy about telling you what's hot and what's not. In this part of the game, this is a demo game. I had to already do some drawings and things like that just to make sure that I can show you the next levels as well. And I'll show you in a different area a little bit about how to paint. But the main feature is that you have to search pages. And so in this case, for example, I found the page here, and I'll show you later also how that happens. I found the page in the trash can here, and something started happening in the world. So you can see that there's a little bit of dust appearing. And now this page will show up in my journal in my backpack. And so this journal has all of the pages. The ones that I found are black, and the other ones are still grayed out. Every time that I write something in these pages, I get, there's two things that happen. One thing happens in the world. It might be a little bit of dust. It might be a flower that grows. It might be lights that go on in the window. All in all, you're bringing the city back to life through your journaling and through answering these questions on these pages that you find. And the second thing that will happen is you get certain tools. And I will show you what a journal page looks like. So this is an example of one of the questions that probably also in these situations, teens could benefit from trying to answer a little bit as well. I've put in a short message in this demo, but obviously you can go longer. You can type in here. You can also record. The game is available in 6 languages, so whatever language you speak, it'll actually type that, as long as you have a phone that enables recording, basically. And as you can see, I can go back and edit. I can change things. I can make the page really, really long, or I can just do a lot of short messages, if you will. If I painted something in the world, as you can see back here too, then it shows up in the journal page, so you can actually see what you did. And the other feature in the journals is that if I have gotten a reward for finding a page and doing something on it, then I actually get a stencil or a sticker or something to create graffiti. Now, to collect that stencil, I have to actually click on it, which means I have to go back into my journal, and I'm again looking at the text that I created. And as I then unlock it, I can start to use it to draw, which I'll show in a bit as well. There's also a blank page. So we can, use this as a diary, if you will, without any prompts as well. So as I start moving through the world, and I'll show you a few different areas, I start leveling up. So the more that I collect and the more that I write, the more things happen. Like here, for example, some creatures came back because I did something. And that means that other phases are unlocked. So in the second phase, and we call this disillusionment, this is when, and I'll let Sheri jump in if she wants to say something, but this is when you've been in that situation longer, you've been on your journey longer. It may feel like this is never going to end, and you're stuck there, and you'll have your ups and downs, and you'll have your emotions that you can't control. And so you can see all of that reflected in the character here in Maisie. From the demeanor, also the sentences, the way she speaks. It'll be going up and down. She'll be positive towards you. Sometimes she'll just tell you, you're never going to make it anyways. Why are you even here? So there's a lot of ups and downs, just like you would in that phase as well. We get a lot of comments from players saying, "Ooh, I feel just like Maisie," or "I feel just like Ty," basically. And so again, Maisie obviously is here to guide you also through it, unravel a little bit more of the history of Shadow's Edge and of the families that were there and why you're there to save them. In all of the levels, we have the opportunity to also put billboards up. It is a city, it's an urban city. So we change those out every once in a while. We work with organizations like the Starlight Foundation or BetterHelp or others. And whatever they resources that they can offer, we put them out here on the billboard and change that up so that young people can actually see those and they can react to those as well. And so here, for example, if I now wanted to go to a different area, so that there's 4 areas in the city and they all represent a different part of yourself. Central is the central role that whatever happens, whatever issue you're going through takes in your life. So there might be questions about frustration, for example, questions about what has changed, what is different now, why do you feel different, even if it's just something that happened during the day. There's some kind of a touch point that made you reach out and try and find that page, and so we're just asking to check in. Part is more your meditative self. There are questions there about what calms you, what kind of rituals you have, how you can help yourself. Downtown is your inner self, which is questions about self-confidence, about your skills, about goals, about things that you might want to do. And commercial is your outgoing self, so that represents your communication to others and how they perceive you. So for example, if we now jump to, let's say, downtown, then you can see that it looks quite different. So this phase anyways looks a lot lighter already. There's like this slight drizzle going down, like dust settling on your situation. And as you start walking around, you can see that there's scaffolding that showed up. You can see that there's drawings from, that have appeared because you've been really going with it and drawing on it. Every wall that you come across, you can actually also paint on. So if you see paint dripping, then you can simply click on it. And with the tools that you earn through journaling, you can start creating art. So in this case, for example, let's pick a nice bright color. You can start, let's pick a thicker nozzle as well. You can start really coloring your world. And I apologize in advance. I'm really not good at art, but it's still fun to do because I can just create colors in here. And then when I'm ready, I can pick a different color because yellow on yellow does not look fantastic. And then I can start working with stencils. So for example, I can take this little mouse, I can turn it around, I can position it somewhere, and then I can start filling it in. And that is a fantastically easy way to start creating cool pictures and graffiti and all those kinds of things. So you can start switching up colors. You can also give it special effects. If you put in a stencil, let's say we put a heart here and give it yet another color.
Hey, Rosie, we have a question really quick while you're doing this.
Yes, let me just finish one sentence. So you can also work with special effects within there. So there are some people that are actually really, really, really good at this, and they make all kinds of stuff, and we can show you some stuff later. So question?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So
Go ahead.
I'm her son. I'm Robin's son, and I have a question. Is there anybody who it might be maybe hard to get by or something? Maybe someone that might be like a negative kind of person that might be hard to get by, to pass through?
Yeah, so the phases in the game allow you to go back and forth, and there's also much more friendly places in the game. So everything simulates the process of actually making what you experience in your life fit into your story as you go forward. And so the point of the questions is really to highlight those, and the point of the colors is really to make sure that you make it your own, and that makes it easier to go through it with it. Does that answer your question?
Again?
Yes.
Thank you.
Perfect. And so I'm taking some stencils here, and I have stickers as well that I can do, that I can unlock. And then the other thing as well is, because I have a doctor's handwriting, so I can add tags here, and then I can change the font, for example, and again, unlock more fonts over time. I can add the tag, I can make it smaller or bigger, and then simply, like all the other ones, also just color it in and it'll show up. I'll show you, I promise there's better paintings than this one in the game that we'll come across. You can undo, you can do more detailed work or less detailed work. So some people really, really make cool graffiti with it, which I'll show you a little bit as well. And now you can see that there's some experience points popping up. So everything that I do gains me some points to then actually get additional stencils and to move up in the world, if you will. The other thing is that the further you get also, and this maybe also is interesting for Robin's son, I forgot your name, I'm sorry. But as you start moving around, when you find pages, the light starts changing and the plants start growing. And so you can see that you have an actual impact on that world, and you are making it more pretty and more beautiful. And then it gets a lot easier to just go through everywhere. Plus also, the more you move through, the higher you can get up, and then you start seeing a view. You start seeing larger parts of the city. So as you start moving on, you see in the background, there's like this yellow ladder. So the further you go in the game, the more high you can see all of the paintings that you've done before. You have a better view of the whole world, of your whole life, basically, of what you've done so far in the game. So as we start moving up, let's see, we go back, and then I'll show you the last level, and then you'll see quite a nice jump. So this is discovery, which is the part where you start incorporating what happens into your life. And here there are some really neat questions that you can really take into your real life, and then also exercise that. So reaching out to other people, for example. And the way that we can do this within the game, and let me actually show you my favorite part of the city, and then we'll do that there. This is commercial, which represents your outgoing self to other people as well. You can see that the world has now changed quite a bit. It's a lot greener. You know, the character is a lot greener. We still see the billboards pop up, of course. I'll show you here, you can get much higher. Right, and you have a view of the whole city. The character will be popping up depending on where you are as well. And here, for example, I can show you, because before I had unlocked them already, but this is how you find a page. So if you find a page, you'll click on it. That brings up the question itself. Gives you a minute to read it. And then you can answer to that question. Oops, sorry. You can add that to your journal. And then something start growing, see? So you now saw that you had a direct impact. The flowers started growing and some butterflies showed up. And I believe there's some nicer artwork around here somewhere as well. There we go. See, so other people make quite interesting things in the game. All done, most of them done with stencils. And you can see also with packs, with the character, much more outgoing, much more smiley, you know, really in her element now. She'll talk about things that she wants to do, that she plans her future, the family's coming back, that she's looking forward to that. She's really encouraging you, because we're almost there, basically, right? We're so close to getting the families back. And the other thing that she will also encourage you to do is, oh, I'm sorry, that was my bad. I jumped back to the park. The other thing that she'll also encourage you to do, she'll encourage you to share your artwork with other people. So in the game, you can't really share your painting. You can't really share your journal entries, but you can share your painting. So for example, if I wanted to now share this, I can open my backpack, and I have unlocked this device we call Shadowgram, and then this is like an Instagram in the game. This is just stuff that other players have created today, and you can like what they do. For example, you can favorite it. You can also give feedback. You can see that when you post, so if I now take a picture of my world, I can actually make some changes still. I can add filters. I can do certain things with it. I can add a comment to it. And then I can post that. I can even add stickers to it still. And that also will earn me a stencil or a sticker, depending on where you're at. So you look at some of the game worlds, for example. Let's go to some of the ones that I favorited. So I can give comments here. I can say I like it. I can say encouraging things like here's a hug if it was something negative. I can say things like hang in there, for example. Or I can say, you know, this really hits home. There's certain canned comments that you can do. And if I like something really very much, I can also share it to my social media or to messages, or save it on my phone if I want to keep it. But also in the system, you can keep things by favoriting them, and then they will show up in your favorites list. This will take a moment to populate because I have a slow bandwidth, but these are some of the examples. So this is a stencil. This is not somebody that's really creative, but here, for example, you can see some of the messages, what people have done with stencils and then putting effects on them. That is actually quite nice. And then there's also a lot of people who just really have very intense messages. You can see some people have like the comments with it. So we could now see here, we could, for example, say, here's a hug. And there, you'll be able to load a lot more images over time. I'm limited here because this is a new demo version, basically. And then the other thing also is we have these challenges in here that are called photo hunts. And so at the moment, once a month, I see there are some questions, so I'll stop after after this. At the moment, once a month, we put out a challenge where we ask people to spray paint something specific. This could be related to like a current issue, like now the coronavirus. It could really be related to Heart Month. It could be related to Father's Day. It could be related to anything, any topic that teens send us in topics as well. And then if you do that, if you go for those challenges, you will have a specific experience points, or you will get a different reward. And this is also a way to just keep engaged, and we'll publish more of those challenges as we now ramp up. Questions?
So in chat, we have a few questions about if it's available on iOS and Android. I have posted links for both iOS and the free download in Android in chat for anybody. Another question that we have is, are users required to make personal accounts whenever they begin the game? This is a game I would like to use in the hospital setting for multiple children. I'm assuming that means multiple children on one device. Mm-hmm. So how would you deal with that?
Yes and no. So we have, you're not required to create an account right away. We give you the opportunity to play first. You can always then click on this pause screen, which you'll see when you start the game, to start registering yourself, and then see what you want to share. For example, you can resume the game, you can turn on and off the music, you can synchronize before you exit. However, the one thing that's not possible, what's not possible yet, is that once you have registered, once you've logged in, when you start the game, you first have to log in again. So you have to be online for like a minute. Afterwards, you can play the game offline again, but you do have to log in, because otherwise we can't really get your progress, right? The progress you made is saved to the cloud, so it's like a black box, if you will, that we can't look into, but we do have to be able to give you that progress, obviously. And so the other thing, I can walk through it some more. I was actually, sorry, I pressed finish demo. The other thing is that if you want to do multiple games on one device, yes, as long as you log in, you can do that. So if there's I can log into 4 different games. And I do this frequently because I demo the game a lot, of course. As you can see, this is my demo 1 account. But if you haven't registered yet, you can't. So you would have to register to be able to have multiple kids on one device. You'd have to register them. We are working on an offline version and offline registration, but it's something that the teens at the beginning also didn't really want, and so that's that. But it is in our development plan.
Okay, next question is, are the posts monitored? This is from Rose. Are the posts monitored on the Shadowgram?
Yes. So we do COPPA compliant as we can, even though most of our players are 13 and above. So we monitor the Shadowgram posts. This is part of the reason why we didn't give the opportunity to just post whatever you want back, because we didn't have the capacity to really read through every post, as in, you know, every comment that would then pop up, because that could be a lot potentially, right? But we monitor the images, we see what's painted on them, we check the comments that they make when they post their image, and we have a way to reach out to have them, or to take it down, basically, if it's something that we don't want on there.
And because our team is really global, I'd like to add that, you know, somebody is on it, you know, 24/7, because we have rotations. And so nothing that gets posted that's inappropriate would ever stay up for long. And to be honest, although we do monitor it, we haven't flagged anyone except for me, because the team didn't know there was something that I posted.
That was a funny one.
I said something like, you know, someday soon this will all end. And, you know, I was flagged for maybe a suicidality when I met, you know, I was looking on the bright side that it would end. So it does work. Our system does work. I got a little bit of humor out of that. And maybe we should jump to, is this a good time to talk about the community and what we're doing? And
yeah, let's take some of the questions, and then, yes, let's move over.
Is there other questions? Okay, well, if there's not other questions on that, let's describe the community. So this, you guys just saw what we're doing in game for young people to feel less alone, to feel like, hey, there's somebody out there with maybe that's going through, maybe they don't have my same life situation, not even close to it, but hey, we can connect on the fact that our feelings about what we're going through are the same. So in other words, we're building community around feelings and not direct experience. And I'll just relate this again to my cancer experience. I mean, I think when anyone's facing a challenge, like for me, when I was sick, I wanted to find somebody my age that had my tumor, that lived near me, that had my exact same experience. And you know what? That's often impossible.
Control back.
If not possible. And so, so when we were designing the game, we thought, well, how is it that we can connect people? Because people, as I kind of grew up and, you know, for many years, I realized, hey, I can connect with a lot of world. I'm never going to meet somebody that had my same experience, but you know what? I can connect with people because I know people understand what it's like to have your life turned upside down, or to be angry, or to need to rebuild yourself. And so that's what we create in the game is communities where people could connect sort of on an emotional level, where they couldn't connect maybe that way in their real life, or didn't have the skills to do that, where they could learn the skills in the game or through our online communities, so that they can start in their real life also connecting with people in that way. And one of the ways is all the in-game communities that Rosie explained. And the other way is our external communities. So what we're building on social media, what we're building through our blogs. Sometimes when you read a story that someone's willing to share about their own personal experience, you can have sort of that aha moment inside and say, you know, that makes sense to me, and kind of borrow their idea or just learn from their own experience. So not just connect with them through empathy, but actually be able to take some ideas into yourself. And through our blogs, we also create a bunch of social media posts, and we also create ones that have nothing to do with a particular blog that we've done, that are, because we know that people sometimes can't read an entire blog entry, or miss a blog on when we post it or whatever. And it's so important to have all kinds of ideas out there, because not everybody's going to relate to the same thing at the same time. So if we push out a bunch of different ideas, small ideas about what they can do in their daily lives, or post something inspirational, or post something that is a relatable feeling to lots of kids. And we do this sort of on an ongoing basis all the time, so that they can. And if you look at this, what Rosie just posted there, on the left-hand side, we have, because we know professionals, parents, and other caregivers, we have one site for them, which is called the diggingdeep.org, our original site, which was really to connect ourselves with professionals who would then let people know, let their patients or clients that they're working with, or students, know about what we have to offer. And that site is still really for a professional and parent and family caregivers. And then on the right-hand side, you see how we change up the look and feel, but related sort of messages. And that's how we communicate with our teen and young adult audience.
Actually, these are all for Digging Deep, Sheri.
Oh, this one is, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I thought that.
maybe Idetta, if you show the next slide, then that's
Next slide. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay.
okay.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay. So that's our.
So here we're focused more on Teen Direct, and we work with young people. So also our designers are sort of in our focus group, because it was important to us to really make sure that we hit their voice and their tone of voice. So for some of them, we may go, oh, really? But they actually like those, and they're and we're starting to see a little bit of uptake also on engagement with it. So we're trying to switch it up a little bit, but still make sure that we keep with the topics, that we make clear that it's about the emotions, and that really all the posts that we do have a purpose of helping them get through certain things. So we've picked a few that we're now posting during this coronavirus time, you know, songs to wash your hands to. Yes, it may sound silly, but it's just something that gets them into a routine. Or What a Mess is just about, you know, helping you feel better by just doing something that you have control over. Or How to Feel Better Now. There's a series of those where we look at, you know, connect with your parents, read a book, all those kinds of things. And then we try to liven it up a little bit with, on the top hand, our big dog here is featured because we're running a photography contest to see how people are interacting with their pets in this times of coronavirus, and also at the same time reassure them that, you know, pets can't get coronavirus. So it's safe to touch them, and it is safe to really spend some time with them. And actually, it's very good for emotions as well. And some of these are not posted, by the way, yet, right? This is up and coming. So you are the first ones to see this.
And Kristi, do you want to say do you have anything to say about the importance of community and in helping people through this time?
Yes, it's interesting to me because not only are people connecting with their family and with their traditional friends, but I myself am really, I'm laughing, I'm chuckling because I'm reaching out to places and people that I never have before and that are really filling my bucket. I'm smiling because I'm sitting next to, this is actually sourdough starter. Because every morning I'm waking up to our local bread company here in Colorado. It's this little place in Louisville, is sending out posts, and they're talking about their own way and how they're making bread in the morning, and they're offering free sourdough starter to anyone who wants to drop by. And there's all of these little ways that I'm filling my bucket. I'm intentionally reaching out more, not just within my family and the people who I'm friends with and my coworkers, but I'm intentionally every morning trying to fill my bucket with some of these stories of people like the sourdough starter and like the restaurants in my community who are reaching out and giving free meals to people in our local hospital. So all of those things are helping me. And my hope is that resources like Shadow's Edge will help caregivers, you know, with some of those blog posts and such, but also teenagers, you know, each day take a minute and reflect and hopefully fill their bucket, just like my little sourdough starter.
And we're getting towards the end, so we have about 5 minutes left. Sheri, Kristi, is there anything that you would like to still say? And Ida, are there any open questions?
Well, I'd kind of like to say our whole game, you described very well, Rosie, the process we move people through from disruption, which of course we don't need to explain what that is because we're all in it together, right? But you know, in disruption, I just like to explain that people cope actually pretty well because we're just our best selves. We use whatever tools that we've had in our tool chest to power through it. And that could be the phase that we're all in right now. But at some point, that may not work anymore. What we've done may not work anymore. And that's the part of the game called disillusionment, when we don't have tricks up our sleeves anymore. And that's a space of confusion and maybe loneliness. You feel the loss, feelings flood in. You may not feel like, Rosie, you mentioned being stuck, that you can get out of it. But the third phase is, I think, the one that's is the exciting phase, because that's a discovery stage. That's a rebirth. That's, you know, moving forward. And I'll just say, you know, one example of a friend of mine, she says, you know, I think we're all going to be, you know, the world's going to be a better place once we get through this reboot. She called it a reboot. And I love that because it's like what Kristi referred to, which is this kind of growth at the end, which we model in the game, which people who have been through something, like my friend who's had a stroke, you know, she saw it right away. You know, somehow we may not see how we're going to get there, and that's not even important at this point to jump into how are we going to get into this new space. But the idea of coming out of it in a different place than we started, and that place maybe even being a better place. That's one thing I would like to end on is to hold that possibility out.
And on that thought, Lisa from Soaring Words would like to share her experience with Shadow's Edge.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So thank you to all three of you. This was so enlightening and inspiring in these difficult times. I've been collaborating with Sheri for at least 10 years. She's a positive health warrior. I run a not-for-profit called Soaring Words, and we've helped 500,000 children and families in hospitals around the world. And Sheri is a big believer in the power of research and evidence-based practice. And has been supportive of our Soaring Words empirical research study. And I just want to pick up on that because these aren't just pretty pictures. It's not just a fun, cool game. It ties into the soaring model, shifting, that when the teens play this game, they feel a shift, that there's a whole world out there and a possibility. Optimism, which is the O, that they get a sense of optimism, even though things are very bleak. And then altruism, helping other people, helping the city to come back to life, helping other teens. And then resilience, like they may not be able to walk, they might not be able to leave the hospital, they might be quarantined right now or, you know, staying at home, but they have a sense of resiliency that in the game they can create what they want to be and present how they want to be. That's very important for all the really important points that Kristi mentioned at the beginning as they're creating their identities. And then imagery, using imagination, narrative, the positive power of healing power of telling positive stories, writing positive messages. And lastly, gratitude, which is the most powerful of all the positive emotions. So being a fan since before the game was even created and invented, it's really great to see how much it's blossoming and flourishing. And I can honestly say that for all the teens and the healthcare professionals that we've shared this with in the hospitals around the world, they found it just such a wonderful tool. And it's such a helpful tool right now in this time of fear and isolation, that this is a really proven way to connect children and teens to their inner strength and hope. So thanks for doing the webinar today. And
thank you, Lisa. And we'll, just to be conscious of everybody's time, we'll wrap it up here, but we do have a list of resources that I believe, Edette, you've put in the window as well, right?
Yep, that's correct. I put it into the window. I will post it again just now for anybody who missed it. And then it will be on our blog, hopefully later today.
Okay, and Kristi, any last words of wisdom of what best gets us through these tough times out of disruption and as quick as possible into discovery?
Oh, I wish I knew. I think what everyone else has said is better than anything I could do. So I definitely am holding on to similar hopes and knowing that if you get through something difficult, the next time something difficult comes in your way, you'll be able to realize that you can do it. So that's resilience, that's growth. So best of luck to everyone. Stay healthy. Take care.
Thank you everybody for joining us today. And we know it was quite short notice. Just wanted to highlight also that we'll be doing this more frequently. So, keep your eye out for some of our social media and join our list newsletter if you're not on it yet. And we'll keep some of these topics coming and we'll rotate also who participates in them to keep it fresh and interesting for you. We have one that we're thinking of also with young people that have played Shadow's Edge. So that might be a very interesting one to listen in on as well. Thank you very much for your time.
thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate it. Well, see you at the next webinar.